This is from the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net.
Hello and welcome to A Spirited Debate. I'm Lauren Green. With the passing last month of Nelson Mandela, many asked the question, where is the Muslim Mandela? Well, after reading an op-ed that proclaimed there is no such figure, Qasim Rashid responded with his own op-ed on VoxNews.com, saying, yes, there is such a man. Qasim Rashid is the author of The Wrong Kind of Muslim, and he joins me now from Washington, D.C.
This is about Fox News. It is Tuesday, the 4th of February, 2014. And I just got through watching Fox News interview of a man that wrote a book about Islam, claiming how peaceful it is. And I've studied the Quran. I've lived in the Caucasus now for 14 years, spring and fall, because I married a woman there and her parents were there, needed care. And now I have a granddaughter there that needs care. And I also bought an apartment there, I think in 2002, in order to have a place for our 2x2 home ministers to go to build home churches. But Fox News I appreciated because it would take a stand against the things that are destroying the home and building autism. They'd take a stand against the women's libbers and the abortionists. And now I'm coming to a conclusion that they are on the other side, an equal danger. As far as looking at the dangers to human society in the future, I was shocked with all the Islamic terror in my travels spring and fall to Russia and going to southern Russia. The JFK had to arrest a bunch of people going to set off bombs, Muslims. And the subway we go in Moscow, terrible. Bodies laying all over the month that we had to wait in 2000 and since then. And the planes that we flew south from Moscow on, 2 of them blown up, killing everybody, women with bombs in their burqas. And where we live in the southern Russia, it's the buses blown up, killing people. In Petrogorsk, just a bomb killing, and it's going on all the time. And I'm pretty sure I just finished a video. I'm pretty sure they took the Winter Games to Sochi to wake up Europe and America that they were giving these terrorists political asylum, thinking they were politically oppressed by Russia, because that was the dogma that we thought, and it was true. Under communism, there was a lot of political oppression of Russians as well as everybody else. The background, and when I had to study Islam and study the Quran, I found out that the Roma came from 1,000 years ago, came from India when the Muslims invaded, and they were following the Quran and murdering the polytheists. But the Roma were the upper fighting class that had fought and been pushed off their land and moved to the west where there were Christian farms, and they just went on with their wagons doing for 1,000 years. Now, the academic estimate is somewhere between 140 and 170 million killed in the Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, when the Muslims invaded from about 900 years after Christ, and it went on for about 300 years. Many invasions, murders, unbelievable exterminations. And I thought, oh, how terrible. And if you add up all the murders from Islam, somewhere around 170 million or whatever. And I made a chart then, and how many per year. It turned out that communism and fascism killed that many in a lifetime. And then it turned out that women's liberation with abortion murders that many in 3 years. They make it legal, but it's killing a life. So what is more evil? On the one side, you have the Islamo-fascists. On the other side, you have the women's liberationists tearing down the home. When I was born, there was, and still amongst the Amish, it was something like 1 in 1,700 with autism. Amongst the general population now, 1 in 55 boys last year. And there is foolishness of children not being disciplined. They don't know. You have to have a relationship with a child to discipline it. And daycare doesn't provide that, the type of depth to give discipline. But so there's a lot of goofiness too. But the autism is real brain damage that you can see with the electroencephalograph. There's areas of the brain that didn't get what they needed during that time period as before they could walk and talk. That nerve growth factor was areas present in certain areas of the brain. That's a whole nother story. Here's Fox News, and it had some insight that there's 2 problems here.
In the Middle Ages, mentally ill patients were imprisoned in asylums rather than treated. By the 19th century, English asylums used a rotating device which spun the patients around at high speeds. It was meant to calm the nerves. And hot irons were also used to bring these patients to their senses. Today, we all know that these are ridiculous treatments. But one therapy, often thought as barbaric, is making a comeback. Now doctors and patients are trying to stifle the stigma attached to what was called electroshock therapy.
I'm going to show you a shock treatment now. Please pay attention to how long it takes, how long the electricity is on.
All right, out with your gun. Huh? Out with your gun.
Okay, this won't hurt. It'll be over in just a moment.
Uh-huh. What's that?
Conductant.
Oh, dab will do you. Right, Mr. Jackson?
Open your mouth.
What's that?
This will keep you from biting your tongue.
Well?
Now just bite down on it.
Oh.
That's right. Just bite down.
Huh?
Now bite down on it.
Good. Are you ready? Here we go.
That's it, folks. How much do you think that cost? And it's a series of 10 or more, and a follow-up with maybe 10 or more, and maintenance. How much do you think one of them cost? Takes less than a minute. $2,500 now. A little bit of money in that. Okay. In the electroshock treatments of today, they disable the brain connection to the body. but the electrical trauma to the brain is the same. If it doesn't cause that grand mal seizure, it's a failure and it's done over with the voltage turned up. Insight into the medical profession. It attracts wonderful people and it attracts horrible people that like to do evil things, just like the police force does. The Young Turks were graduates of the medical college, and if you want to look at some of the strong murdering Islamists today that came out of the medical school in Cairo, there's another place to look. But I don't understand all of this, but I just know the doctors were the heart of the killing something like 1.5 million Christians in Turkey. The Young Turks were the ones that were the leaders. And soon after that, in the 30s, that was in 1905 to 1915. Shortly after that, with Nazism, the first ones to be killing were the psychiatrists and doctors killing the disabled, and the psychiatrists killing anybody labeled as mentally ill. They exterminated their patient load. And after the war, they didn't have patients, and they had all this education. Where do you think many of them went? To England and America and jobs in the VA hospitals. These doctors, psychiatrists that had murdered all their patients, they're killing for and they come and get jobs in America and England after the war because they had killed all their patients. That's a whole other thing, but be careful. Electroshock, they're getting $2,500 a treatment now. And it only takes about 5 minutes, and they lie about if it isn't enough voltage. And they talk about current. Voltage isn't current. Voltage is the potential from here to here, and a spark can jump and kill you. The energy has to be there to cause a grand mal seizure, or they turn it up. It doesn't work. It's got to cause a grand mal seizure, and that it's equivalent to hitting someone over the head with a 2x4. I'll show you a video clip on that. But some testimony in 1985 and in 2011. They had hearings in Washington on this, and I videotaped this. And their electroshock is classified as experimental hazardous. It would never be allowed if that hadn't been in practice before the rules were made. The research that was presented to say that it's safe is just hearsay garbage, not scientific, and it never holds up in a scientific hearing. It's equivalent to dropping a 15-pound baby on its head from a 10-foot high building. And at any rate, let me go on and give you some testimony that was presented to the Food and Drug Administration.
This is my testimony at the Food and Drug Administration hearings on the reclassification of electric shock machines on January 27, 2011. This was in Washington, D.C. The day before, while driving from Florida to Washington, my car was totaled in Baltimore, Maryland on I-95, and miraculously, though a high-speed accident, I was unharmed. When I had my accident in Baltimore, it was raining, but further north in Washington it was snowing so hard that many of the people who would have testified were unable to attend the hearings. This is part of the ongoing development of the website, thewaythetruthandthelife.net.
I would like to call this meeting of the Neurological Devices Panel to order. I am Dr. Thomas G. Broth, the chairperson of this panel. I am a neurologist who specializes in stroke and also am director of research at Mayo Clinic in Florida. Donald Johnson.
I thank you for this opportunity. Forgive me my emotion. I was here with the FDA in 1985 and testified. Then later on that year, the National Institute of Health, National Institute of Mental Health had a two-day consensus conference on electroconvulsive therapy. Now, I don't have a memory. I don't know. It's because I argued with a psychiatrist and he dumped me in the locked ward and shocked me 5 times. I became violent. I tore my nails off grabbing onto the door. And he said after 5 times, he says, oh, sometimes they don't help people. The way I got in there was arguing with him. I had trouble with headaches. I've learned since then it's because I was deprived of coffee. I had a drunken acting first sergeant that had confined me to quarters. And he got away with it. And I had headaches and I complained. So I'm psychiatrically labeled. But I became a physics teacher and I have degrees in mathematics and physics for carborundum research, and I decided to go teach in physics. I would ask any of these professionals here for the physics. You know, they say physics is an example. If I had a 15-pound...
Can you stay close to the microphone so we can hear you?
If a little physics, to see if there's any... This is high school physics. High school physics. If I had a 15-pound baby, we're talking about 200 joules, and when they talk about low treatments, every one of you that's involved in ECT knows if they don't make a grand mal seizure, it doesn't count. You give it again. Turn up the voltage. All right, 200 joules. How high would I have to drop a 14-pound baby to have the equivalent of 1 shock treatment? All these professionals here, how high would I have to drop a 15-pound baby to have the same energy? Or how many pistol slugs would I have to shoot into its brain? This is just mechanical equivalence, high school physics. Anybody? A joule is the energy of 1 kilogram being lifted 1/10 of a meter. It's equivalent to dropping a baby from a 10-foot high building. At the 1985 National Institute of Health Conference, I gave them the Winchester ballistics sheet from Winchester and the Thymatron electroconvulsive device showing the energy, equivalent to 3 pistol slugs to the head. Now they use autism to justify it and use depression. Did anybody watch the BBC with the G20 last month? Obama was in South Korea and they showed the BBC had a little spot on it, the devastated soul, now one of the most thriving, affluent societies. And they said, how much appreciation? They went back and said, but there's a problem. They've got the highest suicide rate in the world. Between the ages of 10 and 40, the major cause of death now is suicide in Korea. Is it because they need a shock treatment? It wasn't like that before the war. Affluence. My mother had to help a baby that was dying from diarrhea and vomiting from the woman next door. She was a good woman, but she had been raised in daycare, and she couldn't bond to her baby. My mother was a teacher, so she cared for the baby during the summer, and it recovered and thrived. We're talking about depriving children and then punishing them for the effects, whether it's autism or depression. Look into it. The breakdown of the home is what destroyed Korea. Yes, it's an affluent society, the highest suicide rate in the world. You want to electroshock all of them? 200 joules. 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 They pay now $1,000 a treatment.
You've got 30 seconds to wrap up.
$1,000 a treatment. Somebody just said, gave professional testimony, we need 1 million people treated. $1,000 million we're going to pay a year for this. Thank you.
This is May 21, 2011. I'm finally getting to post this video. I'm in southern Russia with Olga babysitting granddaughter Darina, and glad to have the opportunity to get this together and post it. I will use it both on YouTube posting and use it as part of my thesis on awareness in the website thewaythetruthandthelife.net. Thank you.
Ну давай спой, она туда тоже ответит теперь.
Did you notice the cost just, what, 4 years ago? 3 years ago, $1,000 a treatment. Now it's $2,500. No wonder they're pushing it, and Fox News is trying to help them. There's money behind it. $2,500 one treatment, and it's at least 10 in the series. It's $25,000. And then follow-up after that. Got to keep coming in for 5-minute treatment that costs $2,500 now. But, next, I have my testimony from 1985. I had gone during Easter vacation. As a teacher, I had that off, and I went to the FDA hearings, Food and Drug Administration in Washington. And I was so frustrated to hear the nonsense and false testimony and nobody knowing what they're talking about that it was 1985. When you have video equipment then, I actually ended up hurting myself carrying. I bought the video equipment to go, and I videotaped the 1985 conference that they had later on. That was during the testing period, and it just happened the days that I was school was over with, and it was there was a week before I had the final exams for physics. So I was free that weekend to go down, and I videotaped the 1985 National Institute of Health and National Institute of Mental Health Consensus Conference. I'll show you that the quality isn't from that time isn't that good, but please pay attention. There's good information there. I'm going to take a minute now to pass through the information screens on this 1985 National Institute of Health hearing. You can stop frame if you want to read some of the details presented.
First person in line over here. 2 minutes, please. Don't forget to give your name, sir. Thank you, I'm Donald Johnson. And I'd like to, first of all, this is probably more interesting people in the audience rather than the panel. The textbook facts that nerve cells don't grow after early childhood. We have a set number, and we do increase in brain mass. It's interesting that Piaget, in his theory of cognitive learning, showed logical stages, and then Epstein and others here at the National Institute of Health showed that the brain growth as a function of time up through 21 was in stages that roughly correlated with the cognitive development that Piaget found in France. But the brain mass increase after early childhood is not due to more brain cells, it's due to the axonal and dendrite growth, increased synaptic junction network. So if we're talking about giving electroshock treatment, we're talking about applying somewhere in the 400 this network. And as far as counting cells, we're not talking about cells here. The electrical transmitters are the axons and dendrites across the synaptic junction, rather small circuits. But so the damage would occur there, not in the cell body itself, decreasing necessarily the number of cells, but certainly we'd be talking about where the conductivity goes down the axons. But at the FDA hearings, the testimony on the reclassification of electroconvulsive devices cited the literature as whether signed or false, typically about 150 joules of energy in a treatment. With the new Thymatron electroconvulsive device, if you check out at 400 volts, maximum of 0.9 amps, and 320 some millisecond pulses.
Could you finish up your question, your remarks?
Yeah, I would like somebody to tell me. I'm a teacher as well as a physicist, and I brought a kilogram with me. Teachers like to demonstrate. Now, this is a kilogram. It's 2.2 pounds, heavier than a hammer used to hit a nail. But I wonder if possibly, like Dr. Stein could tell me, how high I would have to drop this kilogram from in order to have it hit the ground with 150 joules of energy.
I don't know if that question is in the purview of the panel, but that should be your point. I'd like to go on to the next person.
This is only 10 joules of energy. You're talking about dropping it from higher than a 5-story building. That's physics. Supposed to be in pre-med backgrounds.
Thank you.
I never got
All right, out with your gum. Out with your gum.
Okay, this won't hurt. It'll be over in just a moment.
Uh-huh. What's that?
Conductant.
A little dab will do you. Right, Mr. Jackson?
Open your mouth.
What's that?
This will keep you from biting your tongue.
Well,
Now just bite down on it.
oh.
That's right. Just bite down.
Huh?
Now bite down on it.
Good. Are you ready? Here we go.
In this next clip, I gave the panel the Thymatron electroshock specifications and the specifications from Winchester on their pistol ballistics.
We'll give a comment part about that, and we'll try to review that data. Final speaker, Mr. Dillon, you have a problem,
Dr. Rose accepted 2 pieces of literature for reference. I would hope and you might make copies available to the panel. We're talking about having at least accurate information on the device and what we're using. And the one copy is the Thymatron, the brochure on a single sheet handout on the Thymatron pulse ECT device. And in there it shows the physical characteristics. The other, and pardon me for the emotional content of it, I also included a current Winchester ammunition catalog because it shows the energy with which the bullets have. Now that's emotional. I don't really want to bring that up. But running this machine at its maximum brings 201 joules of energy. That is 148 foot-pounds. If you're interested in actually understanding like the truth in lending and what they're talking about, 1 joule is 0.07376 foot-pounds. But what this means is this device, when operated at its maximum capacity, will lift a 1 pound weight 148.7 feet. The energy contained in that is equivalent to 3 25 caliber pistol slugs
Now that's almost instantaneous error in the brain. This takes a half a second. Now that is just pure factual data. To give that lifting of 1 pound energy equivalence in informed consent, how could you not do that? And if you're going to give a procedure, the total energy and the total time are the physical parameters that characterize the device. How could you not include that information? And if a doctor prescribes a drug, he has to record the prescription. Why isn't the total time and the total energy recorded? This has been an experimental hazardous device for years now. Why hasn't this information been gathered that we could be talking with concrete objective facts rather than subjective opinions of psychiatrists and patients?
All right, out with your gun.
Huh?
Out with your gun.
Okay, this won't hurt. It'll be over in just a moment.
Uh-huh. What's that?
Conductant.
Oh, dab will do you. Right, Mr. Jackson?
Open your mouth.
What's that?
This will keep you from biting your tongue.
Well,
Now just bite down on it.
oh.
That's right. Just bite down.
Huh?
Now bite down on it.
Good. Are you ready? Here we go.
In this next clip, the chairman of the panel is telling me not to expect the panel to understand physics. It's not their expertise.
I know the answer. Okay. I mean, we don't run all these button machines. This is not a quiz. So we're requesting the panelists, if there are any questions of information that are asking specific information about the expertise of the panel, we are not going to respond in public, or we should, respond to you in private so that you will.
Yeah, I would hope you understand my concern for informed consent, that the actual parameters that characterize Donald Johnson
So I understand that
be included in
one of the
informed
areas
consent.
where we're always
I'm glad you're on the panel, and I hope you will take the trouble to try and ensure that in layman's language, which I think foot-pound is probably the best layman language there is.
I think that's true to a degree, but I think also have to consider that the delivery system and some of the other factors that dissipate current, we really have to...
It's off for some reason.
That less than 2% of the actual skin surface electricity actually enters into the central nervous system. So instead of talking about 200, we're talking about maybe 4 joules actually getting into the brain.
Yeah,
And
the
then
type of
you have
information
to,
I
sure.
really would be interested in is the amount of electric potential placed across a single axon.
Yeah, they've done measurements.
And is this sufficient for axonal destruction?
No, it isn't. And the second thing I want to inform you, there are medical devices that are being implanted in brains, especially probably blind people with the stimulators.
I'm familiar with that.
And those have a much higher current density than what actually flows through the brain during ECG. These have been
But you
studies.
do understand, we're talking about still a gross of in the order of 100 to 200 joules of energy.
Only about 200 joules of energy going to the total body. I think some of the cardiac arrhythmias and some of the other things that happen have to do with current flow in other areas of the body. But I have been measuring this inside the brain as to how much actually goes through, and I can, just to use a very quick analogy, the current density that goes through the brain at the time of electroconvulsive therapy is about 10 to 30% that which is delivered with medical devices designed like cerebral stimulators or occipital stimulators. No, so I'm saying sure there's current effect, and it is there, but I think the reason put that kind of weight drop on the hip and let it...
Well, we're not dropping it. How high would the energy put into you lift the weight?
I'm sorry, I'll catch it.
This chairman of the panel is trying to tell me that the energy is spread out all over the body. The potential, the voltage, whether there's any current or not, like your hair can stand out because it's electrically attracted, the voltage is across all the circuits. They're in parallel, all these little neurons, and they all got 400 volts across them. 400 volts. Every little axon. They're all in parallel. And the ignorance of these things, and at any rate, let's get on with it.
All right, out with your gun. Out with your gun.
Okay, this won't hurt. It'll be over in just a moment.
Uh-huh. What's that?
Conductant.
Oh, dab will do you. Right, Mr. Jackson?
Open your mouth.
What's that?
This will keep you from biting your tongue.
Well.
Now just bite down on it.
Oh.
That's right. Just bite down.
Huh?
Now bite down on it.
Good. Are you ready? Here we go.
Remember, this is the National Institute of Health and National Institute of Mental Health Consensus Conference in June of 1985. I had been there at Easter time in 1985 to a FDA, Food and Drug Administration, hearing on reclassifying electroconvulsive devices. And it gave me a background to know that something false was going to be said. And you knew the next statement was false because I witnessed their testimony at the Food and Drug Administration hearings at Easter time. They were not naive. They were biased.
The panel were solicited expressly because of their lack of an established opinion on ECT, their lack of being and having done research themselves, and having, quote, staked out where they're coming from. The group came with an open mind, trying to assess what the risks and benefits were for ECT. We spent a good deal of time talking about the balance of risk to benefit ratio. And I think that is documented in our report.
I might get thrown out, but that statement is not true. I'm looking at a panel member that was at the FDA hearing on electroconvulsive devices. His opinion is well known to everybody. How can you say that?
I'd like to give a personal anecdote of my own.
Understand, this is a national press conference at the end of the two-day conference. And watch what happens. It gets closed down.
A piece of a 100-watt light bulb exposed to the neuron. Is that a fair question? If it isn't, just tell me.
It is not a fair question because everyone focuses on the joules delivered by the machine, and a very small proportion of those joules actually get into the central
Well, that's how I was asking specifically are end up being actually applied to the neurons. How many joules end up actually being applied to the neurons of the brain as compared to the surface of a 100-watt light bulb?
If you look at the joules that are entered the central nervous system, it's probably 2 or 3 joules over billions and billions and billions of neurons. And when you divide that out and look at the amount of joules, you get a very low level of stimulation.
I would like to say I gave this panel information on Thymatron, electroconvulsive devices, that maxes out at over 200 joules. That's over 148 foot-pounds. It means that the total maximum possible energy delivered to the skin, head, and brain would lift a pound weight 148 feet in the air. Now, how much of that goes through the neuron is a different question.
Dr. Weiner, do you know how many, what watts would be in a light bulb? Can you?
Well, if you had a 100-watt bulb, it would barely flicker at all, probably not at all, with the kind of intensities that he's talking about actually to reach the sensor nervous.
15-watt bulb
The data that I gave to them this morning, it comes out in a half a second. It's 360 watts.
I want to thank you for your time and your patience.
Could I please ask, I want to ask something about memory loss. Is it cumulative with the more treatment the patient has?
I never imagined I'd shut down a national press conference with all the national networks there. Once the reporter started getting factual information, the press conference was closed. Next, one of the panel members was a ex-physics teacher and could explain something to a reporter.
I could ask questions on that.
But then you divide that by, for the 2% gain in the brain, then it's spread
Oh,
all
there's one therapy wiring here.
Go on, please. I like my wiring.
Good.
a lot of joules per second. So 100 watt light bulb gets 100 joules per second to light it up. That's freshman physics.
Yes. High school physics.
Everybody's physics, right?
Right. And what's your name, sir?
I'm George Murray. I used to be a physics teacher.
Oh, yes, I am right now. If I get back to give my students their final exam.
Next is a down-to-earth discussion with a doctor that makes his living giving people shock treatments. Please understand there's a thing called cognitive dissonance here.
This is a subjective interest. What did you think about Cuckoo's Nest?
I think Cuckoo's Nest is probably, next to Casablanca, the greatest American movie.
If I told you that it almost exactly duplicated my personal experience, do you think that I'm lying to you?
Absolutely not.
Because it does.
For me to say that there hasn't been coercive psychiatry is a lie. I know there has been. And our job, those of us who consider ourselves ethical psychiatrists, our job is to try to get rid of that coerciveness. But the point is that these, I guess you're with them, don't believe in psychiatric therapy at all. So, I mean, we're not able to have a dialogue. I mean, if you basically don't accept that mental illness exists and that drug treatment, for example, is a very effective thing to do, then there's nothing for us to have a dialogue about.
Yeah, but you understand that there are members of your profession that with the phenothiazines now, the literature shows, the literature now shows upwards of 30% for long-term use of tardic dyskinesia. And that funny jerking that when it was being given to me, the psychiatrist wrote down as a symptom of my illness. Do you understand what I mean? These problems have existed, and in looking and willing to find people to be a friend when you need a friend, and with their professional expertise. But the profession itself has had some very serious problems in breaking the trust that naive people have put in.
It's
Not
like
that
the
it's
surgeons
everyone.
in the 14th, 15th, 16th century that cut people's legs off without any anesthesia when they had to. I mean, what happened since 1935 with convulsive therapy, for example, before modification was the first one I ever saw was unmodified, and I thought it was medieval torture. And I wouldn't do it if we didn't have modification. I mean, then it would be a...
Please understand here, the trauma to the brain is still the same. The person is knocked unconscious immediately, whether you can see the body thrashing or not. The modification the doctor is talking about is injecting drugs that disconnect the brain from the body so you don't see the trauma of the brain expressed in the thrashing of the body.
It'd be a very difficult thing. But what you say if you deny all psychiatric therapy, ECT, drugs, is that you're advocating euthanasia because you're saying that the severely mentally ill people have a right to snuff themselves rather than someone else doing it for them. And I say that that's no different than having Nazis come in, line you up against the wall, and shoot you if you're a chronic mental patient.
I understand the concern you're using. From where I've seen that rationale for a profession used to protect people that express anger in the implementation of their treatment,
people that are mentally competent, and I've let the legislature, whoever wants to make that decision, make it, have an absolute right to refuse treatment, as long as they're not imminently dangerous to someone else, and I think to themselves. Now I realize that Saz and Dr. Bregan have different views on danger to self, but you know, if I know that someone is psychotic and they say that they're going to go out and axe murder somebody, I can't let them.
Why don't you lock them up in the jail? That's the thing to do with axe murderers, lock them up in the jail.
Not if they haven't done it.
Well, I think a threat is illegal.
No, it's not.
A threat to somebody's life is not.
It's not illegal unless it's made in a. It's not illegal to threaten someone's life as long as you don't do it in a way that indicates you're imminently right now going to do it. If someone were just say, well, I'm going to get rid of Dr. Bregan, that's not you can make any threat you want.
No, but
if it's
that's
vague and
not what
non-specific.
you said if somebody told you they were going to axe murder somebody.
But if I have the conception that they're ill.
Now wait a minute, we're changing the subject, aren't we?
Then I'm not going to put them in jail.
Well, why shouldn't someone who is incapable of, in fact, you know that many psychiatric wards are less comfortable than jail.
No, you haven't been in Texas jails.
Hey, are we?
Well, say the difference is that you don't believe in mental illness, and I do. So that's we can't have a doctor.
Well, no, I didn't say that.
Well, I'm not saying you, but I mean
it's been misused. It's been misused.
If it's used as an agent of social control, that's absolutely wrong. People should not be deprived of their freedom because they're different. They should not be deprived of freedom simply because they're crazy. Even if just because they're psychotic, they shouldn't be deprived of their freedom. People have the right to be psychotic.
But look, they have been deprived of their freedom because they're different, haven't they?
I'm not saying they haven't. What I'm saying is that you lump all of us into one bag, just like I can lump all of you into one bag, and I don't do that.
I think on both cases there's more tolerant and respectful.
Like I told CNN News, I don't doubt that you have had a very bad experience with ECT. I'm not saying that you made that up. I don't say it's because of your illness. I think you had a very bad experience, and I'm sorry about it.
You know about my experience.
No, I don't. Well, but I'm saying that the people here who say that they had a bad experience, I've never given insulin.
Okay, that's another type of brain damaging. All the brain damaging procedures you call safe and effective. I know your history, and it stinks, and it's full of brain damaging, oppressive treatment, so-called treatment to people. What psychiatry should be called is actually it's actually a good example of abuse. That's all it is.
So I say we can't have a dialogue when we have those kind of differing polarizing opinions.
You tried to dialogue with you guys, but you guys think you have all the answers. That's why you
see. I don't. See, you're making the same mistake that you accuse psychiatry of making. You're lumping me in with everybody else.
Well, I heard you loud and clear at the conference. You were a supporter of shock, and that's good enough for me.
Because I see a lot of people that get better with it.
Because you're into damaging brains. That's good.
All right, out with your gum. Out with your gum.
Okay, this won't hurt. It'll be over in just a moment.
Uh-huh. What's that?
Conductant.
Old dab will do you. Right, Mr. Jackson?
Open your mouth.
What's that?
This will keep you from biting your tongue.
Well?
Now just bite down on it.
Oh.
That's right. Just bite down.
Huh?
Now bite down on it.
Good. Are you ready? Here we go.
Okay, so these problems exist. I'll give you some insight. The desire of women to not stay home and care for their children, to resent their children. They love them. It's like you see these dogs will nurse kittens, and there's a maternal instinct that has survived over the millions of years of development of life. And the great apes don't kill their babies. But the Garden of Eden was that innocent time in the forest when humans didn't have logical communications. They were just doing what they needed to survive. The dominant alpha male would take whatever female he wanted and beat up the other males. And that was what survived. The strongest male and the prettiest female what attracted the male. So the behavior of the females was to the ones that acted in a way that they survived. That's one of the basic laws of nature. God's laws. What propagates is what makes the future. So some insight into these problems today, the right and left, and a little bit of an insight in the middle that I wouldn't want to share, and talk about where Fox News is. By the way, the two things they're talking about is Islam and all of the peaceful, and the other one is electroshock therapy. It's it's good for you. They make $2,500 in 5 minutes, but it's good for you, and I'll talk about that too. But so you've got this dominant male genetics, Islamofascism, and the females submit to that, and many males submit to that because the dominant male scares them, and the threat is real. Ask the Quran, read Surah 9. That's why it's so ludicrous. They talk about all the nice things in the Quran, but the number 2, Surah 2, the Surah of abrogation, says that the old things don't count. Whatever Allah brings later is the better, and replaces that. Well, Surah 9, they mix them up so then you don't know which ones really count. The Imams all know, of course, and you can go online now or on my website and see the Quran in order of precedence, what ones really count, and cut off their fingers and cut off their heads if they don't submit is still counts. Those nice things don't. After the Qurayza tribe didn't help Muhammad, he personally beheaded over 600 men, all of the men that had pubic hair, and they took the women and children as slaves and concubines. That's because they didn't help him. He come back to make war against his own polytheistic tribe, and the Jews stayed out of it rather than help him. But that was an excuse to take their women and property and children. But that is where he had the change. Before that, he used to pray toward, this is 600 years after Jesus, and he was praying towards Jerusalem, but then he changed and prayed towards the black mosque they have there now. But he had this surah of abrogation, and the Jews turned into apes and pigs. At any rate, this genetic background, it's not just the alpha male dominant genetic stuff. I had very good friends. Both of them have PhDs now. They were social studies teachers in the high school where I taught physics and math. And one of my very good friends, a roommate, told me he used to be an anarchist, but there's so little political power to anarchism, he went to socialism. communism. And I said, well, I asked when I had so much experience with Russia and how that was a disaster, what it did to the people. And he just said, well, that was because they were like a corporation and the people that were on top dominated. Well, that's what happens wherever authority is put in the hands of a few. Priesthood. Jesus died by the hands of the priest in order to tear that veil that you can have a personal relationship with your source of existence. You don't have to go to some priest or imam or build some building. The place for that outlook of godliness is in you if you have the spirit of a child. But getting back to this anarchy stuff, that's the male resentment of the dominant male. And that's why the anarchists and feminists make a political alliance, and the gay and lesbian, there's always working together politically, and doesn't have anything to do with raising healthy children. It doesn't have anything to do with the need for the maternal nursing bond, mammalian level. It's animal level. And here we had German products like the Chevy plant in Tonawanda, New York, got German machinery in to make the motors, and after that you didn't have to go through a break-in period. They were so well machined. Is because they had quality workmanship and integrity. And the reason they had it, this is 2014. 2013 or 2012, Merkel did away with the law that married women could not get state support for daycare. It was part of the German culture that the women stay in the home and raise their children. Obama, 2 years ago in the State of the Union, said how Germany is way ahead of us, and we've got to have more early daycare, more early education for the children, because the German students are graduating from high school a year ahead of American students. And what he didn't say was they were starting a year later, but they had the foundation of a maternal nursing bond and a mother in the home for the first 6 years. Well, they'll be losing that, and they won't have the workmanship quality to put together large corporations that function effectively and efficiently. It always amazed me. Our little home church people. I go to Moscow, and here's one there that's an attorney for it, and here's another one that's an executive for an oil company, and here's another one. They're just sending them all over the world. That they have people that they can trust, that aren't out drinking and dancing and entertaining themselves with drugs. That they have somebody with integrity that helps them build a company. But that's a whole nother thing. So I want to present this. Two things. On the electroshock, they're getting $2,500 for one treatment now. It takes about 5 minutes. Can line them up. I mean it. You can line them up and do an assembly line, and then put them on maintenance, so you need to have 4 to 10 more after their series of 10 to 12 or 14. And we're talking $2,500 each. No wonder they're pushing it. But the lies. Oh, it's safe. It's equivalent to dropping a 15-pound baby off a 10-foot high roof. And The idea that it is a little bit of electricity is a total lie. If they don't give enough voltage to cause a grand mal seizure, it's a failure. You turn the voltage up. And okay, but, so we have these two issues. Fox, and Fox is somehow under the influence of this Islamo-fascist male domination. That's where they get the resentment and attack on the women's liberationists and the leftists. And I'm so sad to see it, that they would bring this falseness and parade it and give it an audience, give it an audience. Both the Islam is peaceful and electroshock is good for you. Okay, let's get on with it. I'll show you.
Welcome, Qasim.
Thank you for having me back, Lauren. How are you?
Notice this greeting. It's like this man is part of the team.
Well, it's great to have you back. And before we get to the Muslim Mandela, explain your book, because the title itself is very provocative, and so I would like you to explain, more about what your book is about.
Sure. The Wrong Kind of Muslim is a book I wrote that tells the untold story of persecution of religious minorities in Pakistan, and discusses how Christian minorities, Ahmadi Muslim minorities, Shia minorities are fighting back against Taliban extremism and how they're winning.
This is a lie to those who are aware of the Quran, and an ignorance to those who have been deceived. There are nice verses in the Quran, but they don't count. I will give this background in a little bit.
And what we can do around the world to unite in that campaign for tolerance and peace.
All right, well, thank you very much. I wanted to
What he's saying to Muslims that believe in the Quran is, look, I'm opening the door for you to immigrate to non-Muslim countries. What he's saying to non-Muslims is, oh, we're peaceful people, we're going to come and join you and we're going to work together.
explain that, because it's a very interesting book. Now, let's get to the Muslim Mandela, the Muslim equivalent of a Mandela. And who is this man?
This man is His Holiness Mirza Masroor Ahmad, the Khalifa of Islam and head of the worldwide Ahmadiyya Muslim community. His Holiness is a dynamic figure. He is the world's only Khalifa. And as the leader of the world's single largest Muslim organization.
Please do not be deceived. There's something in the order of 10 million Ahmadiyya, and there's over 220 million Muslims. So it's just, let me give you some background. There are two main groups that follow the Quran. The Persian foundation of the Shia, and the Arabic original Muhammad foundation of the Sunni. They follow the Quran, and when they get the opportunity, they enforce the Quran by death. The Hezbollah is a Shiite terrorist organization. There are so many Sunni terrorist organizations, and yes, they are in conflict with one another because they profess their own leadership of Islam, so they're in conflict. And it got heated up in Pakistan. By the way, the Sunni Muslims have bombed over 80 Shiite mosques since 9/11. The big problem in Pakistan is when back in the 40s, I guess it was, when Britain gave India its independence, and the Muslim parts then petitioned and murdered so many non-Muslims in the Muslim majority areas. Pakistan and Bangladesh. But in this time, so much oil money, Muslim, Saudi oil money, went to Pakistan. It's still there. Madrasas are sending children from America to go to these madrasas to memorize the Quran and come back hating America and ready for jihad. Because it's in the book, and when you indoctrinate a child, they're a robot. They don't have a choice. Some of them wake up, but it's hard to rebel when you've been deprived of your natural development. That's why the Jews have so much problem, so intellectual, but the foundation they have of memorizing the Torah, and they can't tell the difference between some logical projection and the intuitive sense of reality. That's why that's a whole nother thing. Whenever the Muslims don't have a majority, they teach that it's okay to deceive the unbeliever. That's open the doors. I'll give you some information on that later.
We are established in over 200 countries worldwide. He has advocated for well over a decade for universal freedom of conscience, for separation of mosque and state, for a removal of clerics from Muslim majority governments, to have equal justice and equal opportunity for all people regardless of their faith. He has condemned the persecution of Christians in Muslim majority countries, and he's advocated that rather than spreading Islam through any kind of force or compulsion, to only do so through dialogue, through service to humanity. And as a result, he has helped create over 600 secular educational institutions worldwide.
Now understand, for true Muslims that follow Muhammad and the Quran, this is fine. It's fine to deceive the unbeliever. They're opening doors that Muslims can move in. And you don't have to worry. The Quran and the indoctrination of the Quran will bring the true Islam to life when they have enough population. And they do it by when they get enough population to bring Sharia law and enforce, threaten, and murder the peaceful Muslims and bring true Islam. But I'll show you the source of this about lying. The question, are Muslims permitted to lie, is yes, and I will have the verses of the Quran that give guidelines about this read to you.
The Quran 16:106, establishes that there are circumstances that can compel a Muslim to tell a lie. Quran 3:28, this verse tells Muslims not to take those outside the faith as friends, unless it is to guard themselves. Quran 9:3, Allah and His Messenger are free from liability to the idolaters, the dissolution of oaths with the pagans who remained at Mecca following its capture. They did nothing wrong, but were evicted anyway. Quran 40:28, a man is introduced as a believer, but one who must hide his faith among those who are not believers. Quran 2:225, Allah will not call you to account for thoughtlessness in your oaths, but for the intention in your hearts. The context of this remark is marriage, which explains why Sharia allows spouses to lie to each other for the greater good. Quran 66:2, Allah has already ordained for you, O men, the dissolution of your oaths. Quran 3:54, and they, the disbelievers, schemed, and Allah schemed against them, and Allah is the best of schemers. The Arabic word used here for scheme, or plot, is makara, which literally means deceit. If Allah is deceitful toward unbelievers, then there is little basis for denying that Muslims are allowed to do the same. See also 8:30 and 10:21. Taken collectively, these verses are interpreted to mean that there are circumstances when a Muslim may be compelled to deceive others for a greater purpose.
To provide for those who don't have access to education, he helps fund countless hospitals. And in America, very close to home, he inspired the Muslims for Life blood drive. Now, this is an annual blood drive we run every year that has garnered over 30,000 blood donations in the last 3 years alone, and is done specifically to honor 9/11 victims. This is this man, His Holiness, about who I wrote about.
Why don't we hear more about him? It seems like he is quite busy in the world and doing a lot of good, but yet we don't hear much about him. Why is that?
Well, for starters, thank you for the opportunity to speak about him. In fact, he has been all over the world. He has spoken before British Parliament, before European Parliament. In fact, in 2012, he spoke before Congress. And the members of Congress passed or introduced a bipartisan resolution recognizing him as a man of peace. And what's really remarkable about His Holiness is that he is not only a much revered figure among millions of Muslims worldwide, but he is a peacemaker.
This is a preposterous truth. This man is teaching and deceiving world leaders all over. The Quran teaches to deceive until you have the power to terrorize and convert or kill the non-believers. That's where the 140 million deaths in Hindustan came around 900 to 1100. They murdered the unbelievers by the millions until enough of the Hindu warrior class rose up with the realization, before India was completely taken over, and the warrior class started exterminating Muslims. So they came to a fatwa, an agreement with the Hindus. We're not going to execute you. You can have your faith. Of course, they do keep executing. Look what's going on in Kashmir, and Pakistan used to be largely Hindu, Buddhist, and Christian. It's a joke. And in Pakistani occupied Kashmir, they're all been murdered. All Hindus and Christians and Shiites. But that's another thing. Look at how they've deceived the world leaders. The Quran teaches to do this, and what suckers our world leaders are. Listen to this.
I wish to say finally, as I've said many times before, that this is not a war with Islam. It angers me, as it angers the vast majority of Muslims, to hear bin Laden and his associates described as Islamic terrorists. They are terrorists, pure and simple. Islam is a peaceful and tolerant religion, and the acts of these people are wholly contrary to the teachings of the Quran.
I find it hard to believe that this man is this ignorant of the Quran and of Islam after all the experience that the British had with India and the terror and murder and beheadings in the Islamic parts of India, and the way they murdered and made separate areas wherever it was majority Muslim, Pakistan and Bangladesh, and the murdering is still going on.
I also want to speak tonight directly to Muslims throughout the world. We respect your faith. It's practiced freely by many millions of Americans, and by millions more in countries that America counts as friends. Its teachings are good and peaceful, and those who commit evil in the name of Allah blaspheme the name of Allah.
I don't know whether that's ignorance or purposed deceit, but read the Quran and look at reality. The Quran is Allah's word through Muhammad, and the purpose is to gain world domination through bringing submission through terrorism and killing the unbeliever. And that's what's been going on. The men get rewarded to have power in this life, booty and women in the process, or to go to get virgins if they're killed in the process, and get great rewards in the hereafter with Allah. That's the truth. It's a pyramid scheme, and it's been building ever 600 years after Christ. It hasn't stopped. How Bush can be so deceived having the Saudi royalty to his ranch in Texas, I don't know, and that the Saudi royalty were all able to get out of America at the 9/11 bombings. I'm without words to deal with this. Ignorance or deception, I don't know.
And in our Congress right now, you can see how divided it seems. People from the far right and far left have both recognized His Holiness and endorsed His Holiness as a man of peace and as a man of progress for humanity.
For those who don't know much about the Islamic faith, the Muslim faith, we know Sunni and Shia, but he's not either one of those. Is that correct?
Well, actually, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community are Muslims who believe in the Messiah Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian. We believe that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was that same Messiah foretold in ancient scriptures, the Quran, in the Bible. His Holiness, the Khalifa of Islam, is the Caliph for that Messiah. And Ahmadi Muslims are, in fact, Sunni Muslims. So we are a sect of Sunni Islam.
What he's saying is that his leader is the Christ. That Jesus was not the Christ. Jesus, according to Islam, didn't die on the cross. He is not the firstborn Son of God. He is a prophet, subordinate to the prophet Muhammad. Muhammad, as a camel driver, heard about Jesus, even though it was 600 years after Jesus, and he heard about the infancy gospel of Thomas, which is in Ethiopia and Egypt. And in that, Jesus made mud birds and blew on them, and they flew away. That's in the Quran twice. The infancy gospel of Thomas, a goofy book written some 100 years after Christ. But let's get on with it.
But from the perspective of categorizing only one or the other, Sunni is a better way to go.
Now, you say in your rebuttal that every faith has extremists, and this is one comment you've made that has garnered a lot of criticism. But explain before I read some of the criticisms.
Well, I think it goes without saying every faith has extremists. Very shortly we saw Anders Breivik, who claims to be a Christian. Timothy McVeigh claimed to be a Christian, and they did some of the most horrific atrocities in the name of Christ. Now, as a Muslim, I would never...
No, I have to stop you though, because I don't think they actually did it in the name of Christ. I mean, they were not, and they got no endorsement from any kind of clergy person.
She's right. He's lying to make a point. But further than that, just like last March, there was a Muslim coup in Central African Republic, majority Christian country, but the machetes, the salika, come in and with their weapons, killing, murdering, raping, beheading, and established a Muslim government. But the majority Christians then decided to arm, and they formed the anti-salika, the anti-machetes, and started murdering the Muslim invaders and the local Muslims that were entertaining them. So then France got involved to save the Muslims. The Muslims were being killed. And then the EU has gotten involved in the African Union, and they have Chadian troops from a Muslim country there. And in the capital, Bangui, they rescued a bunch of these Salika terrorists from the Christians and escorted them out of town. Read the news last week. These rescued Salikas went, and the Chadian Muslim army took them into safety. And they went to a village and surrounded the village, blocked it, and murdered. And it's those Christians, they're killing Muslims. Oh, the same thing. The Buddhists in Myanmar. Here, an innocent Buddhist monk riding on the back of a motorcycle, just for example, gets ripped off and taken to a mosque and mutilated physically, his parts cut out. And the Buddhists take a stand against Muslims because they've had this rape and Islamic terrorism in the areas where they had a growing Muslim population that wasn't even part of the country. They were brought there by the British. All bad Buddhists. They're killing Muslims. Oh, there's many nice Muslims that don't go by the Quran, but they're the first ones to be terrorized, like in the Caucasus. You don't want to be a peaceful imam in the Caucasus. You don't want to be a peaceful imam in Nigeria. It's just killed. Nigeria, Boko Haram killed a peace-preaching imam and his wife while she was holding the baby in the car, and killed the baby too, because they're preaching peace to Muslims. It's okay to preach it to the unbeliever to make it safe for Muslims to come. And the true Quranic Muslims let the peaceful Muslims go ahead and make a road for them so they can drive in, and then they bring their terror to the peaceful Muslims. Just look at what's happening in Pakistan. What he's saying isn't true. They're killing Christians, but it's not just Islam. The same thing happens in India with the upper caste. The lower caste that are just cleaning toilets want to get out of it, and many of them convert to Christian, and they're murdered for changing their caste. Let's get back to Fox News and the funny smell that's come up.
Our top story tonight, my weekend. And why it took me an hour and 15 minutes to get a cup of coffee and a bagel on Sunday morning. I'll tell you why.
Dueling protests this Sunday near Ground Zero. Supporters and opponents of the project are both staging rallies today.
Of course, there was a crowd shouting at a random Ground Zero construction worker who happened to be walking by wearing a skull cap. Emotions were high, but why was everyone so suspicious?
Where is the money coming from? Where are they going to get the $100 million from? We're following the money trail. Where is this money coming from? This guy has questionable ties. Here's the one that we should all really worry about. Where's Iran in this?
Yeah, it's a little Muslim guilt by association game. Last week we called it 6 Degrees of People Who Don't Eat Bacon. And I held up a card of people showing that you could use the same logic to actually link Fox News with dangerous Saudi money, since the largest News Corp shareholder outside of the Murdoch family is the Saudi prince Al-Walid bin Talal. It's a stupid and childish game I was playing. I was not suggesting that Fox News being in business with bin Talal was actually sinister. I was just using their same reasoning to attack Iman Ralph. But this morning, Fox News got more specific about the real danger posed by the mosque's funding.
The Kingdom Foundation, which has been a funder of Imam Rauf in the past. The Kingdom Foundation, so you know, is this Saudi organization headed up by the guy who tried to give Rudy Giuliani $10 million after 9/11 that was sent back.
Right.
He funds radical madrasas all over the world.
And he funds his imam. The money might be coming from this evil Kingdom Foundation, run by a Wahhabist 9/11 sympathizing, American hating. No. That's Rupert Murdoch's partner in News Corp. Show me the dangerous money guy behind Imam Ralph's Ground Zero terror mosque. There we go. You're not changing the picture. You're. No! Why is the terror funder shaking hands? Why is the terror funder shaking hands with a two-legged basset hound? Wait, that's Rupert because a sinister money force owns part of Fox News. Let's do as Fox News commands and follow the money. This is the proposed terror mosque. We know that it's a terror mosque because the money may be coming from a bad guy who definitely owns part of Fox News. Now, we know that he's a bad guy because we just heard it on Fox News. And by hearing it on Fox News, watching Fox News, I'm increasing their viewership. And their advertising rates go up. Now, part of that money goes to the bad guy we learned about on Fox because he's their part owner, Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, allowing him then to make it rain, so to speak, on the terror mosque. My point is this. If we want to cut off funding to the terror mosque, we must, together as a nation, stop watching Fox. It's the only way. Using their reasoning, it's the only way to cut off the revenue stream to these bad dudes. Now here's the most curious part about this entire report.
The Kingdom Foundation, so you know, is this Saudi organization headed up by the guy who tried to give Rudy Giuliani $10 million after 9/11 that was sent back. Right. He funds radical madrasas all over the world.
And he funds his imam. Fox tells us the terrible thing about this Kingdom Foundation is where they fund it. It's a very bad guy. But they never mentioned this fella's name. And they never showed this fella's picture. And they certainly never mentioned that the fellow they're talking about is part owner of their company. Did the gang at Fox and Friends genuinely not know the head of the Kingdom Foundation's name and the fact that he is one of their part owners? Or were they purposely covering it up because it did not help their fear-driven narrative? For more, we're joined by senior media analyst John Oliver and Wyatt Sinat. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Thanks very much. John, do you know what? I'm going to go with they didn't know. Remember, things are hectic on the morning show, plus Gretchen isn't there and she's the only one who knows how to use Google. Also, it was probably a Hooters Freedom Monday. I just think at the end of the day, they didn't know.
So you're...
Exactly. I'm with stupid.
All right. Wyatt.
Nobody's that stupid. They're deliberately hiding the truth. If Al-Walid wasn't part owner of Fox News, they'd have gone to town demonizing this guy. They would have said his full name over and over again. Al-Walid bin Talal, Al-Walid bin Talal. And look at these villainous pictures. You don't even need to doctor him. He already looks like he's about to feed Timothy Dalton to his white tiger. Fox wants to allude to Al-Walid, but doesn't want viewers looking the guy up and learning about their own ties to him.
But then, Wyatt, why mention this guy at all? Why get into the money trail of this cultural center if it leads right back to Fox?
I'll take this one. Because they're stupid, John. Staggeringly, achingly, almost inspiringly stupid. Look, let's look at the evidence here.
China is not too far away, and it's a great big country that it needs a whole bunch of stuff.
When I first saw this logo, I wasn't really thinking this, but upon further review, perhaps I should have been. And that is, if you look at the Nuclear Security Summit logo, what does that have in common with all those other flags there?
I would just wanted to see how much of an insult it was to be called an ignoramus. Since I didn't know what it meant, I just Googled it. For all of you out there who don't know what ignoramus is, like
it can't be good.
It's an ignorant lawyer.
Let's break that down. She didn't know what ignoramus meant, so she looked it up, and she still got it wrong. John, even if they did know Al-Walid's ties to News Corp, the odds of getting them to mention it on the program would be random at best. You do know they don't even have a teleprompter at Fox News. It's just a man jangling his keys above the camera.
Look, I'll give you Kilmeade and Ducey, But do you know who Dan Senor and Dana Perino used to work for? George W. Bush. And do you know who George W. Bush used to hang with? Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. Bum, bum, bum. That's some evil. It's a level of knowing obfuscation that can only come from having a heart of pure evil.
Guys, this is obviously a very polarizing debate. There's lots of contradictory evidence. Is there a chance there is perhaps a third, less explosive explanation? Something else?
Oh, no, absolutely not.
Absolutely not, John. These are the only two possible explanations, because if they're not as stupid as I believe them to be, they are really evil.
And if they're not as evil as I think they are stupid. We're talking potatoes with mouths.
Not even potatoes, White. A potato can still power a digital clock. So.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Rocks. You're talking about rocks with mouths.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you two could come to some agreement. Thank you very much. John Oliver, Wyatt Snack. We'll be right back.
Then after the breakup of the Soviet Union, which in large part was the Americans and the Saudi Arabians building the Afghanistani Muslims, giving them handheld rockets to shoot down Russian airplanes with 100 soldiers in them. That, along with the torture of soldiers and the soldiers being taken slave, they still get soldiers back in Russia that are find deprived of being locked in cellars and what have you and made used as slaves. It's true. Look into it. But at any rate, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, Kosovo had the Kosovo Liberation Army, and they had Muslims from Russia, from Afghanistan, from Saudi Arabia. Take a look at. I want to warn you, these pictures are gruesome, and I'll have the captions read to you. Watch this. Kosovo has largely been cleansed of Christians now by illegal aliens immigrating from Albania, Muslim Albanians, and terrorizing the Christians. And Kosovo gave Clinton gave them this city, and here's the whole village turning out to destroy a church. It's not a radical jihadists, it's the whole community celebrating as they destroy this Orthodox church.
Mira Lapian kanë ardhur këtu te Kisha Ortodokse në Besian për të shprehur revoltën e tyre ndaj ngjarjeve që kanë ndodhur në Kosovë. Mira Lapian kanë ardhur këtu te Kisha Ortodokse në Besian për të shprehur revoltën e tyre ndaj ngjarjeve tragjike që kanë ndodhur në Kosovë. Mira protestues Lapian kanë dalur këtu te Kisha Ortodokse në Besian dhe e dogjën atë për të shprehur revoltën e tyre ndaj ngjarjeve tragjike që kanë ndodhur ditë më parë në Kosovë. Testuesit ose diçka tjetër?
Gjithçka kena mujt i kena marrë, mos atë sigurisht për rrugë, kena sigurisht rrugën, po tash.
Domethënë pej drejtën profilit që shkon të shku mosha, protestën se kemi këtu bashkëpunim me ta.
As these illegal Muslim immigrants from Albania have ethnically cleansed this Christian Orthodox homeland, they've murdered many and burned over 80 churches. And they put a statue up to honor Clinton for giving them this Orthodox Christian homeland. But taking this, all these churches being destroyed and burned. And it's going on because Clinton liberated them. But anyway, let's get on with, look at Bill Clinton pleasing these people. And when Hillary ran for president, they had to disclose where the money come for the Clinton Library. And literally, he got millions of oil dollars for giving Orthodox Kosovo to the Muslims. They're training terrorists there now for Syria and for the Caucasus. But that was one of the, just like Turkey was the land of the seven churches. The Muslims came in peacefully. We're nice people. We'll work for you. But once they became a majority, first they started threatening, and they got the Roma to convert to Islam, and then they could use the Roma against the Christians. That's a whole nother thing. Let's get back to this thing. Kosovo. Hitler cooperated with the Muslims too, and the largest Waffen SS group was mostly Muslim in that area, killing Christians and Jews and Christian Roma.
Assalamu alaikum, and greetings to everyone attending the Islamic Society of North America 37th Annual Convention. I'm so glad to have this opportunity to join you in recognizing the wonderful contributions the American Muslim community has made to the progress of our nation and to the strength of our communities. For nearly 4 decades now, ISNA has served America's Muslims and its more than 300 community and professional organizations with distinction, working for better schools and better programs, building bridges not just between one another but to the larger American community. But that's nothing new for the nearly 7 million Muslims in America. From trade and commerce to the arts and sciences to public affairs and public life, you've always been at the forefront of progress, helping to bring the values of hard work, faith, and family to the forefront of our nation. For generations now, you've contributed not just to our material fortune, but to our moral fortitude. For that, all Americans owe you our respect and our heartfelt thanks. The Quran tells us that we are made into nations and tribes, that we may know each other, not that we may despise each other.
What Clinton says about the Quran is not true, and this hurts. It hurts Muslims. And
remember, when Hillary ran for president, she had to disclose where the money for the Clinton library came from. It was from the Muslims. It was part of his multi-million-dollar reward for giving them Kosovo.
The truth about the Quran, I'll have Surah 9 read to you in just a minute. But the peace-preaching imams worldwide are being murdered wherever the Muslims get a majority. Just Google peace-preaching imam killed, and worldwide you'll see, whether it's in Nigeria or in Pakistan or in Russia, it's where there's majority Muslims, and the first group that they terrorize is the Muslims. And this teaching to rhetorically memorize the Torah, the Quran, he learned that from the Jews, and the memorization of the Torah, as Muhammad did. And that's where this practice came from in Islam. But it makes robots, murdering robots, suicidal murdering robots, following the truth in the Quran, not what Clinton is saying. How is this helping Muslims when we've got to help and help the peace-preaching Muslims understand that they're caught in a cult that resorts to suicide and murder to reinforce what the Quran says, to bring about the world domination of Islam. But here's some on Surah 9 for you, what the Quran really says, and this is not abrogated.
Surah 9 verse 1, this is a declaration of immunity by Allah and His Apostle towards those of the idolaters with whom you made an agreement. Surah 9 verse 2, so go about in the land for 4 months and know that you cannot weaken Allah and that Allah will bring disgrace to the unbelievers. Surah 9 verse 3, and an announcement from Allah and His Apostle to the people on the day of the greater pilgrimage that Allah and His Apostle are free from liability to the idolaters. Therefore, if you repent, it will be better for you, and if you turn back, then know that you will not weaken Allah, and announce painful punishment to those who disbelieve. Surah 9 verse 4, except those of the idolaters with whom you made an agreement, then they have not failed you in anything and have not backed up anyone against you. So fulfill their agreement to the end of their term. Surely Allah loves those who are careful of their duty. Surah 9 verse 5, so When the sacred months have passed away, then slay the idolaters, wherever you find them, and take them captives and besiege them and lie in wait for them in every ambush. Then, if they repent and keep up prayer and pay the poor rate, extortion, leave their way free to them. Surely Allah is forgiving, merciful.
American Muslims are living proof that people of different backgrounds can coexist peacefully in a diverse world as one community.
Serial killers motivated by an affinity for Islamicist jihad. 2002 October, John Allen Muhammad, Lee Boyd Naldo. The Beltway sniper attacks were a series of coordinated shootings that took place over 3 weeks in October 2002 in Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. 10 people were killed and 3 other victims were critically injured in several locations throughout the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area and along Interstate 95 in Virginia. It was widely speculated that a single sniper, initially identified as a white man with assumed military experience, was using the Interstate 495 Capitol Beltway for travel, possibly in a white van or truck. It was later learned that the rampage was perpetrated by an African-American man born as John Allen Williams. Muhammad joined the Nation of Islam in 1987 and later changed his surname to Muhammad. John Allen Muhammad, and a minor, Lee Boyd Naldo, then aged 17 and originally from Jamaica, driving a blue 1990 Chevrolet Caprice sedan, and had apparently started in February 2002 with murders and robberies in Alabama, Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Texas, and Washington State, which resulted in 7 deaths and 7 injuries, bringing the total victim count to 17 deaths and 10 injuries in Alabama, Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, Louisiana, Maryland, Texas, Virginia, and Washington State, as well as D.C.left (1 right square bracket). In September 2003, Muhammad was sentenced to death. 1 month later, Naldo was sentenced to 6 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. On November 10, 2009, Muhammad was executed by lethal injection at the Greensville Correctional Center near Jarrett, Virginia.
We must all learn to celebrate, not just to tolerate our diversity. No one should have to face discrimination or fear violence because of the way they speak, the way they look, or the way they worship God.
But what about a book that says you must worship Allah and honor His apostle Muhammad or die? And that this book is used to indoctrinate young children, that they are programmed. Suicide, murder, it's all part of their service to Allah according to the Quran. And you say it's a peaceful book, you're lying. It's not. Peace is after everything except Islam is done away with. That's what the peace is in the Quran. Here is what was thought to be the motivation for that serial killer.
Serial killers motivated by an affinity for Islamicist jihad. A series of trial exhibits suggested Naldo and Muhammad were motivated by an affinity for Islamicist jihad. Left square bracket 34 right square bracket exhibit 65-6. A self-portrait of Naldo in the crosshairs of a gun spoke shouting, Allah Akbar. The word Salam scrawled vertically. A lyric from Bob Marley's Natural Mystic. Many more will have to suffer. Many more will have to die. Don't ask me why. Exhibit 65-16. A portrait of Saddam Hussein with the words Inshallah and the Protector, surrounded by rockets labeled chin and neck. Exhibit 65-43. Father and son portrait of Naldo and Muhammad. We will kill them all. Jihad. Exhibit 65-56. A self-portrait of Naldo as sniper, lying in wait, with his rifle. Jihad written in bold letters. Exhibit 65-67, a suicide bomber labeled Hamas walking into a McDonald's restaurant. Another drawing of the Twin Towers burning captioned, 85% chance Zionists did this. More scrolls, Allah Akbar, Jihad, and Islam will explode. Exhibit 65-103, a line accompanies chapter and verse from the Quran, Surah 2190. Fight in the cause of Allah those who fight you and slay them, wherever ye cast them. Exhibit 65-109, portrait Portrait of Osama bin Laden. Caption Servant of Allah. Exhibit 65 to 117. The White House. Drawn in crosshairs, surrounded by missiles, with a warning. September 11th, we will ensure we'll look like a picnic to you and you will bleed to death little by little. Exhibit 65 to 101. Nalbo's thought for the day. Islam the only true guidance. The way of peace. At the 2006 trial of Muhammad, Nalbo testified that the aim of the killing spree was to kidnap children for the purpose of extorting money from the government and to set up a camp to train children how to terrorize cities, left square bracket 35 right square bracket, with the ultimate goal being to shut things down across the United States. Left square bracket 36 right square bracket.
We need leaders that'll say the truth about the Quran. There are true Muslims who say the truth about the Quran, that they're to terrorize and murder, behead, and whatever of the unbelievers that reject Islam. And that it's not a secret that they're doing this terrorism and looking for the attention on purpose. They're not trying to hide. They hide their face so that, like any criminal, so you don't know who they are to arrest them when they're not in control. But so they're saying the truth. Look at how many women are converting to Islam. Terror has its... Look at how many prisoners in jail are converting to Islam. There's a psychology here that is real. And it's at any rate, there are true Muslims who are saying the truth about the instructions that they get from the Quran. And there are true Muslims who are deceiving the unbeliever to make way for Islam to move into areas where it doesn't dominate yet. And there are good people who were born Muslim who don't understand Quran. And there are good Muslim families. The women tend to stay in the home and do a better job in that respect of the animal level, giving health to the infants, that there would be less autism and they would have more strength, whether for jihad or to be missionaries for Christ. But so there was those three types, and I could show you examples of them. But I live in Russia 3 months in the spring and 3 months in the fall. I'm in the States summer and winter. So I passed through John F. Kennedy 4 times a year. Now here's about John F. Kennedy was going to be blown up. So pay attention and see where this is going.
Last updated Sunday, the 3rd of June 2007, 2nd Greenwich Mean Time 3:56 JFK's fuel tanks and pipeline were the target of the alleged plot. Had the plot been carried out, it could have resulted in unfathomable damage, deaths and destruction. U.S. Attorney Ruslan Moskov, JFK plot charges. U.S. Attorney Ruslan Moskov said the plot was chilling. 4 people have been charged in the U.S. over plot to bomb John F. Kennedy Airport in New York, U.S. officials said. They include a former cargo worker and a former MP for the Caribbean nation of Guyana. One of the suspects is a fugitive, believed to be in Trinidad. The plot, which did not go past the planning stages, involved blowing up the airport's fuel tanks and pipeline, Justice Department officials said. 1 arrest was in New York and the other 2 took place in Trinidad. The 4 men are charged with conspiring to bomb one of the busiest airports in the United States. It was one of the most chilling plots imaginable, U.S. Attorney Ruslan Moskov told a news conference. Had the plot been carried out, it could have resulted in unfathomable damage, deaths and destruction. The pipeline is 40 miles, 64 kilometers, long and carries jet fuel from New Jersey and through the New York boroughs of Staten Island, Brooklyn and Queens. The pipeline serves 2 other airports in the area, LaGuardia and Newark Liberty. They took extensive measures to seek expert advice, finances and explosives.
Now here's a British Broadcasting Company's background investigation into these people that were going to blow up JFK.
Terror on our doorstep. Profile. Jamaat al-Muslimin by Robert Walker. BBC News. Sunday, the 3rd of June 2007. U.S. officials say 4 men charged over an alleged plot to blow up John F. Kennedy Airport in New York have connections with Muslim extremists, including Jamaat al-Muslimin, a radical Islamic group based in Trinidad. There has been no comment from the group about the allegations. Jamaat al-Muslimin first came to attention in 1990, when it tried to overthrow the government of Trinidad and Tobago. More than 100 armed men stormed the Parliament building and took the Prime Minister and members of the cabinet hostage. Jamaat al-Muslimin, Muslim social group in Trinidad. 140 members took part in 1992 attempt, stormed Parliament and Trinidad and Tobago TV, taking cabinet hostage. 24 people died during coup. Group led by Yazid Abu Bakr. Those jailed for the coup were freed in 1992. Accused of links to criminal gangs, the militants surrendered after 6 days, claiming they had been granted an amnesty. And, although they were arrested, a court later agreed they should be freed. Since then, Jamaat al-Muslimin has had several run-ins with the authorities. The group was linked to a series of bombings, but denied involvement. Last year, the organization's leader, Yazid Abu Bakr, was acquitted of charges of conspiracy to murder 2 former members of his organization. The population of Trinidad and Tobago is mainly Hindu and Catholic. There is a small Muslim community, most of whom are Asian. But Jamaat al-Muslimin draws its support from the even smaller number of Muslims of African descent. There is little history of Islamic militancy in the Caribbean. But security analysts have suggested the region could be attractive as a base for terrorist groups because of its proximity to the United States, its porous borders, and because of the widespread poverty on the islands.
What you're about to see comes directly from the Quran.
There's another one.
Oh, there's another one. Another plane just
It rolled down on itself, and it is not there anymore.
At the time, I was in the process center, getting ready to process to my first tour to Afghanistan.
So November 5th, we're going through our medical screening, which we have to go through every time we get ready to go on a deployment.
I just got to Fort Hood actually 24 hours before November 5th. The unit I was attached to at the time, we were deploying out to Iraq.
Came in after lunch and they told me to come back at 1, and when I came back it was all filled up, so I had to sit in the overflow seating.
Approximately 1300 or 1 p.m. I was washing my patrol car, starting to get ready for my end of shift, and had a call from dispatch that shots had been fired at the SRP site.
Thank you. We're tracking the breaking news out of Fort Hood, Texas. There's been a mass shooting at the Army post there.
One of the worst tragedies ever at a U.S. military installation.
There was a single shooter that was shot multiple times at the scene. However, he was not killed as previously reported.
Authorities say the shooter is 39-year-old Major Nadal Malik Hassan, a military psychiatrist who was reportedly about to be shipped overseas.
Muslims rejoicing in the carnage. They call themselves the Revolution Muslim. Today on their website, they called the alleged shooter, Major Hassan, an officer and a gentleman. They said, quote, "We love you." At the same time, they called the slain soldiers terrorists who are in, quote, eternal hellfire. These men are radicals, but they are also Americans, believe it or not, who praise Osama bin Laden and celebrate the 9/11 attacks. So what's so extraordinary is that we found them out in broad daylight, out on the streets of New York, trying to spread their message just a few feet from a peaceful American mosque. Drew Griffin of CNN Special Investigations Unit has this Uncovering America report.
For 20 years, the Muslim faithful have been drawn to this gleaming mosque in the heart of New York. It is time for afternoon prayers. American Muslims and Muslims from overseas, as many as 4,000 visit here every day. They come to praise Allah, give thanks, and to pray for peace. Imam Shamsi Ali preaches against terror here, against the violence that right now sweeps many Muslim countries. But just outside the gates to his mosque, radical Muslims are preaching a very different view.
How big a threat are these people who come here, well, maybe here today, and trying to reach your congregation?
Islam is about peace. Islam is about moderation. Islam is about friendship. Islam opposes any kind of hatred against anybody.
These are the brothers of Revolution Muslim.
We tell you Muslims to rise up.
They are recruiting just outside New York's 96th Street Mosque.
That the Quran commands that you disavow and make hatred and enmity between democracy, between nationalism, between secularism, and that you see Obama as the enemy he really is. That you see the United States as the enemy it really is.
Youssef al-Khattab, a Jew who lived in Israel and abruptly converted to Islam, and Yunus Abdullah Muhammad, also a convert, both born and raised in the United States, a country whose way of life they say they hate. And if you are not a Muslim, they count you as a disbeliever. Their mission? To terrorize you.
We're commanded to terrorize the disbelievers. And this is a religion, like I said.
Commanded to terrorize the disbelievers?
The Quran says very clearly in the Arabic language, Torhibuna. This means terrorize them. It's a command from Allah.
He apparently walked into a processing center Thursday afternoon and opened fire on his fellow comrades.
He got up, stepped in front of me as I was signing soldiers in.
It sounded like somebody just started yelling out, Allah Akbar.
He yelled Allah Akbar and started shooting.
Yelled Allah Akbar, which God is great, twice. Reached up on the right side of his ACU top, pulled out his weapon with his right hand, fist and palm, turned the lasers on, pointed the weapon at the other soldiers that were sitting down in the chairs, and he started discharging his weapon inside the building.
Approaching the scene, approximately 2 blocks out, I could just see soldiers running in all different directions.
The first round of bullets, one hit me in the chest. I had to go down to the ground to get cover, and I obviously couldn't breathe because I had been shot.
The shots started firing. I didn't know what the noise was. I'd never heard it before.
And then all of a sudden, like, everybody just starts freaking out and panicking. So me and my buddy just dropped down and low crawled to the hallway behind us, where then we encountered a female soldier laying on the floor in a fetal position, holding her stomach, saying, my baby, my baby.
I got out of my patrol car and ran up a slight incline to one of the rectangular buildings.
The laser went across my line of eyesight. I blinked. At that time, he discharged a weapon.
And I looked left and saw the flash of a red laser in my direction and heard gunshots.
And the first round hit me in the head. It felt like I'm driving to the hole playing basketball, called an elbow to the head, a strong elbow. I took 2 steps back, spun around, hit the floor.
He shot me in the arm and then was shooting in another direction, and then he shot me 2 more times.
When I turned around, I turned my back on him, and he shot me on the side. So he shot me on my femur, on my side, my femur.
I saw him, and he was firing at soldiers behind me and that were between him and I. So I began to return fire to him.
And I was trying to crawl behind the desk to gather myself so I can go ahead and finish the fight inside. Even though I didn't have anything to fight with, anything but a laptop computer and a pen.
And I released the table that I was attempting to rush the shooter with. Hassan had reloaded a second magazine out of his right cargo pocket, popped it in, charged the handle, and began firing at me.
For that man to know how to combat reload like that, he had to have an essential amount of practice. Like, he was like professional at it. Like, you would think you were coming against a special forces guy.
He shot me through the left hip. The bullet went through my left hip pocket, went through my left intestine, both large and small.
I was being splattered from the brick of the corner of the building, and I was instantly hitting my hand, but My hand was directly behind my head, so I had to duck my head to avoid getting hit in the head. And then when I peeked back around, he was within feet of me.
For a second, I just pretended like I was already dead, because I knew that if he had seen me, he was gonna, and I was still alive and crawling around, that he was gonna finish me off.
He came around the corner. Within 6 to 8 feet, we began to just fire blindly upon each other. He hit me next in my thigh, which didn't take me down. And then the next shot was in my knee, which had ended up shattering my knee in like 120 pieces. So I felt pain immediately and went down on the ground and tried to continue to fire on him.
But it's the look on his face while he was shooting it wasn't a battle cry, it wasn't a grimace, it wasn't a smirk. It was just a cold, hard look, as if he did not care. And his eyes, I mean, I couldn't even tell the difference between his pupil and his eyes. It's kind of like a shark's eyes.
He was in contact with radical elements overseas. He was obsessed with his Muslim faith, and I think nothing was done, in part because I think of political correctness.
He felt that was his own little way of assisting his brethren in the battle against the United States, because that was his jihad, his holy war. And he was following in direct order that was given to him by one of his confidants, who he was in constant communication with throughout the latter part of his military career.
The United States had been seeking to kill or capture al-Awlaki for almost 2 years.
Awlaki is a terrorist. Probably the most significant risk to the U.S. homeland.
To never underestimate the power of fear, especially when the enemy of Allah hears Allahu Akbar.
U.S. authorities say the accused gunman at Fort Hood, Major Nidal Hassan, killed 13 soldiers after Awlaki provided religious justification for jihad in a series of emails.
You know, put all politics aside. Let's deal with the real case. And the real case is it was discovered, has been discovered, rediscovered, that this was part of a terrorist activity.
The Army knew he was in contact. The FBI knew he was in contact. All the way from 2005 up to the shooting, he had email messages and conversations. They knew he was in contact with them, and they did nothing.
Well, since the tragic incident, it's been downplayed. First, it was a workplace violence incident. Senior intelligence officials, including your predecessor, downplayed the email exchanges between Mr. Hassan and al-Awlaki, which always concerned me. One of these emails particularly literally outlines exactly what Major Hassan did, and it's the one on May 27th, 2009. And at the end of it, he says, so I would assume that suicide bombers whose aim is to kill enemy soldiers or their helpers, but also kill innocents in the process, is acceptable. I mean, there is a huge red flag in this email.
But it's really clear that it was a terrorist attack. He had emails with, at the time, our #1 terrorist. He yelled Allah Akbar. He wanted to be a terrorist. That's what he wanted. He sold all his stuff knowing that he was going to die that day.
At one point, for instance, he stated in front of a group of them that he thought a Muslim American soldier would be justified in killing his comrades in defense of Islam. But rather than reporting that immediately, they kept quiet. And Major Hassan was actually promoted after making statements like that.
The fact that he's referencing suicide bombings and, I mean, referencing basically a suicide attack that happened in Iraq in 2003 or 2004, you know, saying that this was justified. I mean, I don't know how somebody couldn't see him as a danger. How, you know, one of the things that when the FBI was looking through these emails and realizing that he's communicating with Anwar al-Awlaki and basically looking for a pat on the back because he's saying, hey, I believe in the same things that you believe.
It has been put out in House, Congress, and Senate meetings that the terrorist attack that happened on November 5th in 2009 has been declared as workplace violence.
In workplace violence, people are disgruntled about pay, they're frustrated over promotions. This person was angry at what was being done, he felt, against his own religion, and he wanted to take people out.
Right now, he's got a beard that he's refusing to shave because of his religion. Recognize it as an act of terrorism for what it is, because if we label it as something else, it's not making it go away, and it's not bringing awareness that needs to be brought up.
You have 14 that are dead, not 13, because one of the soldiers that were killed, she was pregnant. A future leader.
It's disgraceful that they don't want to recognize the soldiers for their sacrifice. I mean, they were fighting a domestic enemy. I mean, they were killed and wounded by a domestic enemy. Somebody who was there that day to kill soldiers to prevent them from deploying. You know, if that's not an act of war or an act of terrorism, I mean, I don't know what is.
Workplace violence is not a Muslim jihadist terrorist and camouflage by wearing U.S. Army military uniforms, opening fire on unarmed, unprotected soldiers who are just trying to go down range to help soldiers deal with the things that went on in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's not workplace violence. That's terrorism. And I pray every night that somebody will finally care enough to make it what it really is.